Okay, so first things first, this video is going to contain spoilers for BoJack Horseman in its entirety, and spoilers for the Amazing Digital Circus. Uh, you know, BoJack Horseman's a decade-old show. If you're clicking on this video, you probably watched it. And TAC just ended yesterday, actually. You know, shout out to the team, everybody who made it, whatever. And this is a rant. This is not scripted. If you like TADC, more power to you. I am technically still a fan of it. I don't associate with the fan base at all. Like not at all. But um, I really do appreciate what the first 7 episodes of the show were doing. Then episode 8 came out, and I was like, oh, this is not where I expected, but I can see where they can turn it. And then episode 9 came out, and it just demolished any intrigue, stakes, or drama that the show had, and like just every character that wasn't Jax or Kane got completely sidelined or was only used for another character's arc, essentially. But this video is not about the finale necessarily. This video is about how Jax completely and utterly gets mogged by Bojack Horseman, the character. And it's not close in terms of writing a tragic and troubled character. First of all, if you removed BoJack Horseman from the show, the arcs of the other characters do not stop. Mr. Peanut Butter still has to do with his maturity and not being able to listen, his excess and tendency to distract himself from reality, and kind of bringing other people into his whirlwind, similar to BoJack, so that he can just forget about his life and suppress, the way that he was raised, not knowing about any of his parents' deaths and stuff. He still has stuff outside of BoJack, but somebody like Todd, still discovering his asexuality, his purpose in life, what he actually wants to do, his self worth. Even if BoJack wasn't there, Todd still has a story to tell, with his mom and his stepdad and whatnot. For instance, Carolyn still has a story to tell with her motherhood, her fear of committing to relationships, the constant motif of her seeing something where there's nothing and giving meaning to things just to make her feel better, even if they hold no inherent value, and her needing to prove herself in her male-dominated career. And Diane, which is the biggest one, right? But she still has to deal with her anxiety and her depression. She still has to deal with her, proving herself as an artist, as a writer, due to her upbringing and her shitty family, not really believing her, and thinking that they're not good enough for her. With One Trip Pony, with the Secretariat book, working for Girl Cruise and stuff that she does with Guy afterward. Writing the feel good stories. Like she still has a lot of stuff to do. Her dealing with Mr. Peanut Butter, feeling like Mr. Peanut Butter is just an infinite well of goodness, and that there's something fundamentally wrong with her. Similar to BoJack, and she just cannot be happy. Her inability to find stability in her relationship with a Guy is feeling like if Guy is the only good thing in her life, then something is wrong. Her general just really devaluing, the characters have something to do constantly, and the show proves this. The show isn't just about BoJack. There are many episodes where BoJack doesn't even show up. Not saying that obviously the show is about BoJack, and BoJack is the best character because he gets the most screen time and he's just the most interesting. Um, but the characters have shit to do outside of him, and if he were to be removed from the show would be worse. Yes, I agree. But the characters would still be interesting because they're well written and they have stuff to do and they have lives outside of the whirlwind of BoJack, regardless of his perspective on the matter, being a narcissist and egoist, thinking that he's the most important person in the room and that everybody around him is blessed to have known him. Jax, on the other hand, is not the same. Now, this show was the visual language and what we were being told by the creator herself, that this would be an ensemble show and it wouldn't just be about 2 characters. Because if you're gonna make the show about Jax, just lead with that. I would have rather had the show be about Jax, Cosmo, and Ribbit, because that conflict was way more interesting. But no, we assumed that Pomni was going to be the main character, right? And her growth just gets completely stunted just to be in service of Jax. Gangle has no purpose of existing if not to be Jax's victim. Gangle has 1 episode. I don't think she barely gets any lines. I really wish they did more with Gangle. But no, the victim stories are not important. in the digital circus. The stories of the victims are not important. It's the abuser and the person who, does the bullying and does all the awful, shitty things and how they had a rough past and they need to be forgiven. Which, if you're gonna make it like that, then you have to make the character somewhat redeemable, but he's not. If you're not gonna make the character redeemable, then don't make him redeemable. And Bojack Horseman does not get redeemed ever. He tries to get better in season 2 and season 5 and season 6, but ultimately he falls into those same pitfalls and traps and does worse and worse shit each time. And the public might, sweep it under the rug, but he knows that he is bad. And Diane knows that he is bad. And Todd knows, even if they're not as antagonistic towards him. Like Bojack Horseman, it's a misread of the text if you believe that at any point in the show he is redeemed and therefore, just removed of all guilt, removed of all wrongdoings, and is a completely clean slate. There's a point in the show about that, how Diane doesn't let him feel like that because it's fundamentally wrong. You know, literally season 1, episode 3 talks about it. Season 3, episode 10 talks about it. Like trying to escape constantly and constantly to make himself feel better and just remove all feelings of terribleness. I wish I had better words to describe it. During the interviews, Xerox of a Xerox, like he thinks because he's a celebrity that he can get away with certain things, or that because he had a trouble passing, he can get away with certain things. That's literally the point of the show, is that he can't. That nothing excuses him of his actions. Which brings us back to the amazing digital circus. Jax was, in my opinion, a good character. Because, he was the only, which again, the way that this was structured, getting back into my previous point before I went on that tangent, is literally completely structured around Jax. Zubul doesn't really have much to do outside of their body dysphoria or gender dysphoria. I thought that, their character development is just being more subdued, getting more comfortable after episode 4. Gangle is interacting with Ragatha now, probably because Pomni was nice to her, nice to Gangle in episode 4. And, otherwise she was just kind of getting bullied and people weren't really sticking up for her. And she was more quiet and subdued. But it was like, oh, of course, this will be expanded on later. We'll get more lines. And kind of a similar thing for Zubul. Zubul was really isolated, and then they started interacting with the cast much more, just actually engaging and going on adventures and participating, making significant more connections with Gangle and whatnot. And I was like, it's not that they're not developing. It's just it's happening like in a more subdued fashion, is what I thought until we got to episode 8. And it's just like, oh, we're not really doing anything with these characters. It's just kind of the Jax show. Here's another panic attack, here's another panic attack. And they just don't really get anything to do. I don't think Gangle gets more than 10 lines in the movie, and Zubul is just kind of there. Like, I thought Zubul was a really interesting character. And they just get sidelined in their own show, which sucks. Because Jax is the cornerstone of the show. It's all centered around Jax. And the idea of Jax, which we'll get to later. Because if you remove Jax from the show, it all falls apart. Because there's no way that they wouldn't be able to get along with each other if Jax wasn't there stirring shit up. Which, yeah, works for like the show as a model. But if you want this character to get redeemed, or if you want the show to be an ensemble cast, you can't make it like that. You have to do stuff with the other characters. Ragatha is probably one of the best written characters in that show, and she gets shit on constantly. I mean, relentlessly, despite being way more layered, despite having like, if you want to argue like the people pleaser thing, it's not a good thing to do. And I'm not saying obviously what Jax does is worse, but that's not what this is about. I'm saying that like compared to Jax, Ragatha is much more realistic and intelligently written. Her flaws are realistic. The little tyrant, the dialogue that she has in episode 9 about wishing that it was her, and why she was the way that she was towards Jax and still holding out hope for him, and her saying that it wishes that it would have been her makes sense with her was wanting everybody to be okay because things used to be okay until Jax came and Ribbit abstracted and Kaufmo abstracted, and she is just trying her best and it's eating up at her inside. And with somebody who was abused at a young age by her mother, and seeks the adoration of people, but also wishes to lift others up. That's a realistic thing for her to say, and it makes sense because she is depressed, because she is defeated, because regardless of what she does, it feels like nothing really matters. So she tries her best to hold on to this persona of being positive and trying to create control the emotional responses of other people, kind of like how she does to Pomni in episode 2. And it makes sense, even if it's not a desirable, you know, trait. It makes sense for the character, and it's interesting to see how that it stays consistent throughout the whole series. And she is a good character for it. It's a realistic depiction of people who are people pleasers and why that archetype exists. She is a good, well written character who has fantastic dialogue. It took me the longest to decode her because of how similar she was to me. Jax, his backstory, the only like correlation that it has to the like how he acts is, yeah, scared of being vulnerable. Mom's slung a lot of really personal, deep, you know, insults at him and hugged him after and pushed her off. Makes sense why she did the same. He did the same to Pomni. Okay, why he pushed Kaufmo away, why he pushed Ragatha away. Yes, that in itself makes sense. What doesn't make sense, because in the scene where Ribbit and Jax are talking, Jax didn't have to share as much as he did. He only had to share just like he could have left the thing. He just said I ran away from home and was homeless after that. Didn't have to share the thing about the mother. So Ribbit wasn't forcing him to share about anything. I get that's the point, that he feels vulnerable, that he's scared of being outed or seen in that way because people might use it against him to hurt him. But like how he starts acting towards Rip, it just doesn't really correlate. Like that's why you act. That's why Jax has been acting the way that he does, and you can't. I can't suspend my disbelief further and just say, "Oh, it was just happening in the background. It's lore. It is happening in the background because now it makes sense." No, it doesn't make sense why he starts acting antagonistic towards Ragatha. It doesn't really make sense like why he starts becoming distant from Kaufmo outside of the instance of Ribbit abstracting. Like it just doesn't like that's why he's a dickhead to Gangle. That's why he's just awful to Zubul. That really? That's why he throws Ragatha in deep fryer because he had a shitty relationship with his parents and moved away and was homeless, which it can cause for erratic behavior. But going back, I understand that much. But going back to Bojack Horseman, the reason why Bojack is a dick to Todd is because those insults that he hurls at Todd mirror how his dad, Butterscotch, hurled insults towards him. Like it's constant degrading, even when it wasn't completely warranted. When he was just being a kid, just being creative, wanted to just do stuff, and that's how he is towards Todd. The reason why he wants adoration from Kelsey and from Diane and from Anaspatacopita and wants all that validation is because he didn't receive that from his mother. It all makes sense, why he's such a severe alcoholic because from a young age his parents were alcoholics and they were smokers and that was the way that they coped, and he was constantly surrounded by that, like the reason that he feels that he can just be absolved of all of his wrongdoings after a big gesture like Todd with the boat, or like, when he realizes that with Todd, that Emily wasn't the issue, so everything can go back to normal like it's an episode of TV, is because everything good about being he learned by being good, he learned from TV. And characters are always doing this grand gestures to show that they care, like in Free Churro, which makes sense why he did the shit with Todd. It makes sense why he got the D from the Hollywood sign, and why he is just unable to look within and see that he is the problem, that he needs to keep getting up every single day to be better. Jax's trauma doesn't really correlate to the way that he acts. It really doesn't. Like, it would make more sense for Kinger to be the more apathetic, who gives a damn, because he was literally here since the 90s and lost every single friend that he had to abstraction, including his wife. Kinger has more reason to be a dickhead than Jax does. And I'm not discrediting that, you know? I'm not discrediting his trauma. I'm not saying that, like, people who act like that, or that it can't be a correlating reason, but as a viewer, as someone who is invested in the story, invested in these characters, that is not enough. That just isn't satisfying. Why did he press the button in episode 7 then? Because he was just having trauma, because he didn't want to go back to the real world, I guess. And trapped in that's enough, because he had a messed up life that just was not able to be turned around. And if he set up like, oh, the reason that I don't care about getting back to the circus is because even if I did get back to my life, not that he would open up like that, but like even if I did go back to my life, I'm too messed up to even fix. So it's better to be here. That's why I do whatever I want, Pommy. That's why I da 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 da. Like something, like hey, or like just him enjoying. It's like, and this is just the best, better than being in the war. Like something, because otherwise, with given the context that we have in totality, it just does not make sense, and it doesn't correlate, and it's not satisfying to me personally. You know, like it just to me, it's just disappointing. And just back to the comparison with Bojack and Jax, like being a trouble, like it completely knocks Jax out of the water. Like, if you want to make him an evil bastard, just make him an evil bastard. You know? It just feels like we're constantly flip flopping between, oh, he has a good heart, and oh, he's actually really bad. Because it also bothers me. Because, like, when Bojack does the stuff to Penny that he does, like it's treated as like this is awful. Even with the lantern scene playing the happy joyous music, that's just from his perspective, right? Doesn't mean that it's actually a happy joyous moment. Like when Bojack kills, and yes, he did kill Sarah Lynn, it's treated as such. It's not like the way he tries to divert attention from his victims and onto himself, like he's the real victim, is called out and said to be wrong behavior by multiple characters and by the show, just its language. And Jax doesn't really get that. Like, it's just like, oh, he did all these bad things, but and he doesn't even get revived. He doesn't even get redeemed. It's just kind of more psychoanalysis for Jax because we need more Jax shit. No, fuck Gangle. Like Gangle gets nothing, and every time that Jax abuses Gangle, it's played for a laugh, like on the escalator, like with the maid suit. Like it's just when Ragatha gets thrown into the deep fry, like, and he never ever gets called out for any of this except by Zubul and by Ragatha in that one scene where he breaks Gangle's mask with the baseball or the softball. It's all treated as a joke, but then you have these scenes where Gangle is worried that Jax is going to hurt her more for not being on his team. Like, am I supposed to take this seriously or am I supposed to not? Like, you can't. It feels weird tonally, and I thought they were going to like expand on that. Like, from Jax's perspective, it's this, but from her perspective, it's that. But Gangle's perspective doesn't matter. The victims' perspectives don't matter. It's just about Jax and how hurt he is and how we need to get somebody to fix him, which really bothers me with the language of the show. Because apparently Kane was a main character too, because we were focusing on him the same amount as the others the whole time, for sure. And in the last episode, we get just a bunch of Kane shit. And it's just like, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, guys. And then Zubul says, it's good for you to be back, which is such character assassination. It's marvelous. Like, it's honestly impressive. But essentially what the show is telling us with Jackson Kane is that doing terrible shit is okay as long as you just say that you're sorry. You don't have to improve, but it's two male characters and it's up to, the woman to go and take all the emotional abuse, all the physical abuse possibly, and feel bad for him and sympathize with him until he gets better. Which I think they're doing that more with Jax than they are with Kane. But it sets a really bad precedent, and I know that's not what Goose means to write. Supposedly, I hope. But it's the story is so jumbled up at that point, it just becomes an incoherent mess. You know, like we focus on the effect that Bojack has on Diane. In the last episode, we focus on in that one episode, 3 in season 4 about how all the shit that Todd has been through living with Bojack. What happened to her, what happened to fucking Kelsey to an extent with her career. what happened to how she uses Princess Carolyn over and over to get him out of situations and just treats her awfully. Like we get focus on that. It's just not like it's really it feels really disingenuous and honestly gross depending on your interpretation. Especially that scene in Jax's mind dungeon where he chokes the hell out of Pomni for prying, essentially. Even though it was fake, whatever. Not that Jax hasn't been violent towards others in circus before, but it sets a really bad precedent and it feels kind of gross and it's not a satisfying story to have this really broken, fucked up character who does these awful things and is a man, and the woman just need to, bare their souls and fix her and feel bad. It should have been Ragatha. Ragatha should have pushed more. Pomni should have done this more, pried more, even though it wasn't her fault that Jax got freaking abstracted. Gangle, I don't know, like shit like that. Really upsetting. Really, just that's not how I'm not a writer. I'm not this. I'm not that. But like, don't take a chef to, you know, surmise that a dish is bad. And comparatively, if you're writing a troubled character and you can't and you do it like this, where you can't decide whether they get redeemed because they still have the emotional scene with Pomni, Pomni hugging Jax and saying, "You should have just talked to me, man." And but he still dies, so all the Jax haters get their comeuppance, I suppose. But he doesn't improve, or he kind of improves but not really. And no one calls him out overtly on why his ways of thinking are wrong, except Pomni, I guess, in episode 6. Like with that scene with Jax and Kinger, where it's like you're all just gonna be on his side, even though for it's not at all the same because Kinger has been nothing but he's my goat. He's been nothing but great to everybody in the circus and tried to actually help them when all Jax has done has been fuck them over again and again and again. And he didn't even get a lot of shit for pressing the button, which there should have been a whole discussion conversation about that, but it just got swept under the rug because Jax can just do whatever he wants. Get away with it because he's troubled and we're actually all in this together and Jax is one of us too. They're so nice to Jack. They are so nice to him, and he just doesn't take any form of reciprocity. Even Bojack, despite being a loner and being apathetic and agoraphobic, still keeps people around to keep his head above the water, even if he doesn't see them as equals, like Todd and like the Fly from, the old Sugar Cube house, season 4, episode 2, the Fly, that he screws over and essentially emotionally manipulates like he does with freaking like he still, hangs around Vance Wagner in season 6, despite him being a piece of shit. He still keeps people around to keep his head above the water, whether it be relationships like Princess Carolyn or Wanda or, Gina. He doesn't completely deny the idea of companionship, but he just does it in a really negative and unhealthy way. So if you wanted to really show how unhealthy he was, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. I can't buy the fact that just because Jax went through all his trauma, he is completely against the idea of talking to Pomni or going to Bond, not even Bond, just be around them when the circus, Kane dies and they're in the circus and they're rebuilding. I don't buy that shit. And then he abstracts. Like, I don't buy that he wouldn't go and at least be in their company because that's what he does throughout the show. He still, sits with them at the couch and whatnot, engages with them even if he is bullying them. Like, I don't buy that shit. It's just, it doesn't feel realistic in my opinion. And it doesn't necessarily need to be realistic, but it feels so inconsistent with himself. Like they didn't know what they were going to do with Jack, so they just kind of like, oh fuck, we have to end the series. I guess we'll abstract him and then give him a little, scene with Pomni, and then that's the end of his arc. Because he doesn't grow, he doesn't change. He just kind of like lives. He's a dickhead. We learn more about why he's a dickhead. It's unsatisfying, and then he dies. You don't even get. If you're a Jack's lover, you don't. I don't know how you could be. Please explain how, like, genuinely, no malice, no cynicism, like how that's satisfying for his character if you're a fan of Jax. like how that ending for him was good or satisfying to you if you're a mega fan. Because I feel like that doesn't even do his character a service. He just kind of like he gets more psychoanalysis, like, oh, these are his different personalities and whatnot, and this is why he is the way he is, which I'll give them credit. I think that the conversation between Jackson and Ribbit was actually very well written. I liked it. It was a heart wrencher. It was a I liked that one, you know. But explain because it was just shit that we already knew. We already knew that something happened with Ribbit and she abstracted. And it was probably at the snow place that they showed in episode 7. We already knew that probably Kaufmo probably talked or Kaufmo and Jax probably had a bit of a falling out after Ribbit's abstraction, which we got confirmed. People were already theorizing that Jax was homeless, and we got that confirmed too. So it's just kind of like shit that we already knew or could surmise about his character. Nothing. If we don't get that whole exposition dump, my thoughts on Jax as a character and why he is the way he is don't change at all. I don't understand how that's satisfying. Like when we learn about Bojack's trauma, everything correlates. Everything makes sense to why he is the way he is. And him growing up in his career, relationship with Herb, and a horsing around, and all the shit that he does, it makes complete sense why we have the current incarnation of Bojack now. It all lines up. I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of disappointed that the ending of TADC just wasn't what I want. I thought they were going to pull through and they didn't. And truth be told, I think it's better that a story is told the way the creator wants it rather than the way the fans want it, even though that ending felt like it was written by the fans and was more what they would have wanted than compared to the supposedly dark ending that we were going to get. But I digress. And who am I to tell a creator that I know your characters better than you know your characters, right? Um, I'm just a guy, and you know, shows made a lot of people happy, me included. And at the end of the day, it's a big win for indie animation. But just with these next 3 shows that Glitch is producing, that being Gaslight District, Knights of Guinevere, and Gameoverse, I have faith in Dana Terrace that, Knights of Guinevere is going to be good. But just with Murder Drones and now Digital Circus, Glitch is building a reputation of not being able to write coherent stories that make sense and is more obsessed with cool imagery and cool moments in isolation that are emotionally heart wrenching rather than making cohesive narratives, which I would prefer personally. And it's not fair to put that on one studio, no matter how big they are, and put that on the creators like Gooseworks and Nick and Rubber Ross and Dana Terrace need to carry indie animation and do this and do that. At the end of the day, they're just making things that they want to create that they wouldn't have been able to make otherwise. And the fact that the show makes people happy is infinitely more worth than any criticism I could give. However, I feel that it would have been way better for indie animation if the finale was good and if Jax was a better written character and if we got more moments with the other characters that made it more memorable and made people want to engage with it more and perhaps made people want to create more, you know? But nah, I don't know. That's just me. If for whatever reason you haven't seen any of the shows, I suggest you go watch them. Watch BoJack Horseman. Watch TADC. Support the creators. Yeah, that's all. I just need to get that off my chest. Bye.